I used to think some people were just born lucky. My sister, for example. She could drop a glass of milk, lie about it, and somehow our parents would apologize to her for putting too much pressure on her. Me? I could breathe too loud, and Mom would snap. Why do you always make everything harder than it has to be? That was the soundtrack of my childhood. My name's Harper, 33 now, but I grew up in a house that looked perfect from the outside white porch, flag in the yard, family photos lining the hallway like trophies. Inside, though, it was a two-story reminder that love had a hierarchy, and I was at the bottom. My sister, Isabel, was the golden one, the kind of kid teachers wrote home about. Straight A's, school choir, homecoming queen, all that. My parents ate it up. She could do no wrong. And me? I was responsible, which was just their polite way of saying cheap labor. I did laundry, washed dishes, cooked meals when Mom had a headache. And somehow, when guests came over, they'd smile and say, "You have such a helpful daughter." Yeah, helpful. Like a maid. I still remember the moment I realized I wasn't just unlucky, I was expendable. I was 12, standing at the top of the stairs, listening to my parents argue because Isabel wanted a car for her 16th birthday. Dad said they couldn't afford it. Mom said, "Then maybe stop wasting money on Harper's school trips. Isabel actually has a future." They didn't know I was there, but that's when I stopped expecting love, to be fair. By the time I graduated high school, I didn't even bother applying to the colleges they promised to help me with. Isabel got a full ride thanks to Dad pulling strings with his boss at the bank, but I went straight to the recruiter's office and joined the army. The recruiter looked me up and down like I was lost. "You sure about this?" he asked. I was. I'd spent 18 years serving my family. I figured I might as well get paid for it. The army was the first place where people actually saw me, not as the other daughter, not as the maid, but as someone who earned respect. It wasn't easy, but compared to walking on eggshells at home, getting screamed at by a drill sergeant was practically therapy. Over the years, I built a career. Logistics and operations. Real work. Measurable results. I led people, made decisions, earned medals. My parents never once said they were proud. Isabel, meanwhile, got married to some guy who inherited a chain of car dealerships. The wedding was massive white tent, champagne, a live band. I wasn't invited to be a bridesmaid. I was invited to help organize. That's who I was to them. Still the maid. I kept my distance after that. Phone calls were rare and short. Holidays? I'd ship a box of cookies from whatever base I was stationed at, and Mom would text back, "Thanks, honey," like I'd mailed her an invoice. Honestly, I was fine with that. I didn't need their approval. I had my unit, my brothers and sisters in uniform, and a sense of purpose they'd never understand. Then last spring, I got the call. My grandfather, Colonel Walter Graves, had passed away, 91 years old, decorated World War II vet, Korean War advisor, the kind of man whose handshake could quiet a room. He was the only person in that family who'd ever treated me like I mattered. When I was a kid, he'd let me sit in his office, flipping through his old service photos, listening to him talk about leadership, integrity, and honor. He used to tell me, "Never forget, Harper blood makes you related, but loyalty makes you family." I lived by that, still do. So when I heard he'd died, I didn't even think twice. I booked a flight home, not for my parents, not for Isabel, but for him. The funeral was everything you'd expect from a man like him: flags, medals, men in uniform saluting. My parents were front and center, crying louder than anyone, like grief was a competition. Isabel showed up in black designer heels and sunglasses that probably cost more than my car. I stood near the back, in my dress uniform, quiet, no tears, just respect. After the service, people started to leave. My father shook hands with local veterans, milking the attention. Isabel hugged guests with the grace of a politician's wife. I was about to slip out when an older man in a navy blazer approached me. Late 70s, maybe. Sharp eyes. He looked familiar, like one of Grandpa's old service buddies. "You're Harper, right?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn envelope. "Your grandfather wanted you to have this." He blinked. "Me?" He nodded. "Said it was important you got it personally. No one else." I took the envelope. It was yellowed, sealed with wax, my name handwritten across it in Grandpa's old block letters. To Harper, read only when I'm gone. That alone was enough to send a chill down my spine. I thanked the man, tucked the envelope into my jacket, and left before anyone saw. Something in my gut told me this wasn't a thank you for coming kind of letter. Grandpa wasn't sentimental like that. If he left something for me specifically, it meant something. When I got back to my rental car, I sat there for a long time, staring at it. I don't know what I expected, maybe some advice, a story, or closure. But when I opened it, what I found wasn't any of that. It was a single page, typed, with Grandpa's signature at the bottom. The first line made my stomach drop. Harper, if you're reading this, it means I've failed to protect the truth. What you've been told about my estate is a lie. I froze. My pulse spiked. The estate? He had a house, some land, military pensions, and a few investments. Isabel had told me Mom and Dad handled everything that Grandpa left everything to the family. The letter continued. The will they'll show you isn't the one I signed. I left the majority of my estate to you. Your sister changed that after my first stroke. Ow sec. My chest tightened. I read it again, slower this time, trying to convince myself I'd misunderstood. But no, it was clear. Grandpa left everything to me. Isabel had forged the will. There was more. I have reason to believe your parents know, but chose silence to protect her. I'm sorry, Harper. I wanted you to know the truth, even if it cost the Graves' name everything. My hands were shaking. I looked around the parking lot like someone might be watching. But it was empty. Just me and that letter. Sitting in the car of a woman who'd spent her whole life serving everyone else, finally realizing she'd been robbed by her own family. I folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope. My heart beat loud in my ears. For years, I'd thought my family just didn't love me. Turns out, they'd stolen from me too. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't planning to let it slide. The sound of rain hit the windshield as I drove away from the cemetery, the letter still sitting on the passenger seat like a live grenade. My stomach twisted between disbelief and fury. Isabel had always been selfish, but forging a will? That wasn't teenage vanity or sibling rivalry. That was crime-level greed. I pulled into a diner off the highway, one of those places with flickering neon signs and coffee that tastes like regret. I slid into a booth and ordered nothing but black coffee, the kind that feels like punishment. The letter sat on the table between my hands, wrinkled from how tightly I'd been gripping it. What the hell was I supposed to do? Call my parents? March to Isabel's mansion and wave it in her face? No. That's what she'd expect a hot-headed move she could twist into. Harper's losing it again. She was always good at that. I snapped a photo of the letter with my phone and encrypted it into my cloud storage, old habits from the army. We were trained to never hold a single point of failure. I might not have been in combat anymore, but the strategy still applied. Protect your intel, choose your battlefield, strike when the enemy's guard is down. A waitress with tired eyes poured me a refill. You all right, An? You look like someone ran over your dog. I gave her a faint smile. Something like that. No. When I left the diner, the air smelled like wet asphalt and gasoline. I sat in my car for a while, scrolling through my contacts. I had friends in logistics, in the reserves, even a few in military legal. But who could I trust with this? A forged will, family fraud. It was personal, not tactical. I needed someone who could help me prove it without turning it into a circus. I drove back to my motel and opened my laptop. The first thing I did was look up the official county record for my grandfather's estate. Sure enough, there was a copy of the will filed 2 weeks before his death. The executor listed? My father. Figures. Then I noticed the date on the notarization. It didn't match the day Grandpa was in the hospital. I knew because I'd visited him that day. He couldn't even hold a pen, let alone sign a legal document. My pulse kicked up. This was bigger than family betrayal. It was fraud and possibly forgery across state lines. I took screenshots of everything and backed it up. If my sister thought her crime was buried with Grandpa, she hadn't met me in combat mode. By the next morning, I had a plan. I called an old friend from base, Sergeant Lucas Price, now working with the Army's Legal Affairs Office. We'd served together for years. He was one of the few people I trusted completely. Price here, he answered, his voice still carrying that clipped military rhythm. Lucas, It's Harper. I need a favor. Off the record. There was a pause. You in trouble? Not yet, I said. But my family might be. I explained the basics: my grandfather's death, the forged will, and the letter that started it all. He didn't interrupt, didn't question me until I was done. Finally, he said, "You still have the letter?" "Yeah. Original copy. I digitized it too." "Good. Keep both secured. Don't confront anyone until we verify. You know chain of custody rules?" I almost laughed. "Lucas, I trained half the base on chain of custody." "Right. I'll get in touch with a contact who deals with estate fraud. Former JAG lawyer. Civilian now. I'll tell him to expect your call." He gave me a number and hung up. I sat back on the bed, the cheap motel comforter squeaking beneath me. It wasn't lost on me how ridiculous this all was. I'd spent years handling million-dollar logistics operations overseas, coordinating troop movements, tracking assets across continents. Yet here I was, unraveling a white-collar crime committed by my own sister in our family's living room. Before I made the call, I decided to test something. I sent Isabel a text. "Hey, Grandpa's funeral was nice. You holding up?" A few minutes later, the 3 dots appeared. Then her reply came. "Barely. He was such a great man. Mom's devastated." "No." I stared at the screen. No mention of the will, no hint of guilt, just fake grief wrapped in small talk. I sent another. "By the way, who handled his estate? Dad?" Another pause. "Yeah, he took care of everything. Why?" I typed and deleted my reply 3 times before settling on. "Just wondering. Grandpa meant a lot to me." "I know. He loved you too," she sent back, followed by a heart emoji. The irony almost made me laugh out loud. When I finally called Lucas's contact, the man introduced himself as Attorney Raymond Cole, a former military lawyer turned private investigator specializing in estate disputes. He had the calm voice of someone who'd seen too much bullshit to be surprised by anything. "Miss Graves," Sergeant Price filled me in, he said. "You're alleging a forged will?" "I'm not alleging it," I replied. "I have written proof from my grandfather and evidence that the official document doesn't match the hospital records." "All right, send me everything you have: scans, metadata, timestamps. I'll cross-check signatures, notary details, and witnesses." "I can do that." "Good. And Harper?" His tone softened. "Whatever we find, stay level-headed. Family cases like this can get personal." I almost smiled. Personal's an understatement. Whoa. By evening, I'd sent everything: photos of the letter, estate filings, screenshots, even samples of Grandpa's old signatures from military paperwork I'd kept. Cole confirmed receipt and promised a preliminary review by the next day. That night, sleep was out of the question. My brain kept replaying every moment from childhood, reinterpreting things I'd ignored. The way my parents always let Isabel handle Grandpa's mail. The time he mentioned revising his will to even things out, and Mom had changed the subject immediately. The way Isabel got unusually nervous when Grandpa had his first stroke. It was all there, hiding in plain sight. I just hadn't seen it because I'd been too busy trying to earn scraps of affection from people who saw me as a tool. The next morning, Cole called. "Harper, you sitting down?" "Always a good sign," I said dryly. The will on file was definitely tampered with. The witness signatures are fake, copied from another document. And the notary listed? Retired 5 years before the date shown. I felt a cold rush down my spine. "So it's confirmed?" "Not officially yet, but yes. It's a forgery. The original will was likely destroyed or replaced. Your sister and father would both have needed access." For a moment, I didn't say anything. My throat felt dry. Cole continued. "We can file a civil complaint first, keep it quiet while gathering admissible evidence. But if you want this to go public, you'll need a criminal case. That's where your military background could help. Your credibility's solid, and the Army tends to take integrity very seriously." I exhaled slowly. "You're saying use my reputation to force them to face it." "I'm saying you've got leverage, Sergeant." I thanked him and hung up, staring at the motel wall. A cheap painting of a lighthouse hung crooked above the bed. I thought about Grandpa, how he'd always talked about honor like it was oxygen. Maybe this was my version of carrying that forward. I wasn't sure yet how to confront Isabel or my parents, but I knew one thing. They'd built their comfort on a lie, and I was done keeping their secret. I grabbed my keys and the envelope from the nightstand, the paper soft from handling. My pulse was steady now, my mind clear. I wasn't going to beg for truth. I was going to prove it. The house hadn't changed much. Same white porch, same manicured lawn, same flag hanging out front like the family inside represented something worth saluting. I parked a block away, not because I was scared, but because I wanted a minute to steady my pulse. You can serve 2 tours overseas and still not be ready to face your mother. I took the letter out of my bag and tucked it inside my jacket, then started walking. The neighborhood smelled like barbecue and fertilizer, all too normal for a place built on lies. When Mom opened the door, her eyes flickered with that same polite confusion she used to give me at family gatherings, like she was trying to remember what my name was before deciding whether I was welcome. "Well," she said, smoothing her hair, "look who decided to visit." I gave her a tight smile. "Missed me, huh? Don't be dramatic, Harper. You never call, you never write." And croot. "I've been busy serving the country," I said. "How's retirement treating you?" Her lips thinned. She hated when I reminded her I'd chosen duty over family brunches. "Your father's in the study," she said finally. "Isabel's stopping by later." Perfect. The air inside was thick with furniture polish and false comfort. Photos of Isabel's wedding covered the walls, her in white lace, my parents glowing beside her like she'd cured cancer. I wasn't in a single picture, not even one from childhood. Dad looked up from his desk when I stepped into the study. "Harper," he said, standing like a man greeting a stranger. "You should have called first." Didn't want to ruin the surprise. He gave me the same careful smile he used when reporters came around during Grandpa's memorial events. "You hear about the funeral?" "Yeah," I said, closing the door behind me. "That and the will." His smile vanished. "What about it?" I placed the envelope on his desk. "You tell me." He looked at it like it was ticking. "Where'd you get that?" "From one of Grandpa's old friends," I said. "At the funeral. He said Grandpa wanted me to have it." Dad hesitated, then reached for it, but I pulled it back. "You can read it, but it doesn't leave this room." He nodded slowly, and I handed it over. Watching his eyes move across the page was like watching ice crack. His shoulders stiffened halfway through, and when he got to the part about Isabel forging the will, his jaw clenched so hard I thought he might break a tooth. "This is ridiculous," he said finally, tossing the letter onto the desk. Walter was confused near the end. "You know that. Isabel handled things because he trusted her." "Trusted her to fake his signature?" I asked. "Watch your tone." I leaned forward. "I've seen the county filings, Dad. The notary listed on the document retired 5 years before it was signed. You want to explain that?" He blinked just once, but that was all I needed. Silence, confirmation's quieter cousin. Mom appeared in the doorway then, her arms crossed. "What's going on?" "Your daughter's accusing her sister of fraud," Dad said, voice tight. "I'm not accusing," I said. "I'm proving." Mom's face hardened. "You've always been jealous of her. Even as a child, you couldn't stand that she was special." "Oh," I laughed, low and humorless. "Yeah, Mom, she's special all right. Special enough to rewrite a will and steal a man's legacy." Her eyes narrowed. "You've always looked for ways to hurt this family. First by joining the army instead of staying close, and now this. I won't let you drag us through the mud." I took a slow breath. "You don't have to. The truth's dirty enough on its own." Dad stepped forward, his voice calm but cold. "You have no idea what you're getting into. Do yourself a favor, burn that letter and move on." The part of me that once would have obeyed him was long gone. I looked him dead in the eye. "Not this time." A soft voice came from behind us. "What's going on?" Isabel stood in the doorway, perfectly put together as always. Designer coat, soft curls, eyes wide with practiced innocence, the family's little actress. I turned toward her. "You tell me. You're the one with the script." She frowned. "Excuse me?" "Grandpa's letter," I said, holding it up. "He left everything to me. You forged the new will." Her expression didn't change, not right away. Then she gave a soft, pitying smile. "Harper, you really should let this go. Grandpa wasn't well. I took care of the legal stuff because no one else would." "You mean because you didn't want anyone to see the real paperwork?" She sighed like I was being difficult. "You've been in the military too long. You see conspiracies everywhere." "No." "Yeah?" I said. then explained the retired notary's signature. For a moment, the room went dead silent. Isabel glanced at Dad. He looked away. Mom shifted her weight, and in that one small movement, I saw the whole truth they all knew. My chest felt like it might burst. You let her do it, both of you. Mom's voice trembled. It was your grandfather's wish that the family stay united. He didn't want a thief for a granddaughter, I cut in. And he didn't want cowards for children. That got her. She went pale. Isabel stepped closer, lowering her voice. You really want to blow this up, Harper? After everything you've done to this family? I raised an eyebrow. Everything I've done? Running off? Embarrassing Mom and Dad, never being around when Grandpa got sick? You don't deserve a cent of what he left? There it was, the mask slipping. I smiled, small, sharp, controlled. Funny thing about deserve, Grandpa thought I did. That's why he wrote my name, not yours. Her face went red. For a second, I thought she might slap me, but instead she grabbed her purse and hissed, "You're insane," before storming out. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Mom turned to me, voice cold again. I hope you're happy. Not yet, I said. I picked up the letter from Dad's desk and tucked it back into my jacket. You might want to call your lawyer. Because I already did. That. I walked out before they could answer, boots clicking against the polished floor. Outside, the air felt sharper, cleaner. I got into my car, gripping the steering wheel, pulse steady. For the first time, the weight of their judgment didn't feel heavy, it felt fueled. As I drove back toward town, I saw Isabel's car up ahead, parked crooked by the curb. She was sitting inside, phone pressed to her ear. Probably calling her lawyer, or maybe her husband, rehearsing her next performance. I passed her without slowing down, but for a split second our eyes met through the windshield. Hers were wide, calculating, not scared, strategizing. Good. Let her plan. Let her make the next move. I wasn't her quiet, invisible sister anymore. I was the woman their lies built, and I was ready to tear their kingdom down one truth at a time. The first thing I did after leaving that house was park behind a hardware store and let out the breath I'd been holding for 20 years. My hands were shaking, but not from fear adrenaline, the kind that comes right before a mission starts. I'd spent my whole adult life tracking logistics, tracing shipments, and catching people who thought they could hide things in plain sight. And my sister had just volunteered to be my next case study. I grabbed my laptop from the passenger seat and connected to the diner Wi-Fi. The one good thing about small towns, no one locks their networks. I pulled up Ward Marine Industries' website. That company had been my grandfather's pride and joy, built from scratch after his Navy retirement, specialized in parts for naval vessels, all legit back then. Isabel and Dad had taken over the board after his stroke. The homepage looked fancy flags, shipyards, corporate pride, but the moment I opened the financial section, I could smell the rot. A consulting fund listed under Maintenance Logistics, created in 2010, the year Grandpa first got sick. $20,000 in recurring transfers, no vendor listed, just a private account under the initials SW. SW, my sister's initials. I scrolled faster, cross-checking dates, scanning PDF invoices. Every month, like clockwork, payments left the company and disappeared into that fund. Whoever set it up wasn't even careful. It was lazy corruption. I emailed the data to Attorney Cole and called him right after. He answered on the second ring, voice low, like he was already expecting bad news. I found a consulting fund tied to my sister's initials, I said. 20 grand a month, same as clockwork. Do you have the account number? Partial. The rest is redacted. All right, he said, the calm tone of someone already 10 steps ahead. I'll subpoena the records if needed, but for now, don't trigger anything that could alert them. Can you verify who manages their accounts? My father, I said. Figures. Cole sighed. You're looking at internal fraud, layered over inheritance fraud. That's a pattern. A pattern. I'd seen patterns like that in procurement scandals, overseas ghost vendors, fake contracts, fake consultants. Same formula, different battlefield. When I hung up, I texted Lucas Price, the Army contact who'd connected me to Cole. Need a favor. Off-the-record check on Ward Marine contracts. He responded 5 minutes later. Copy that. Sending through the DoD vendor list. While waiting, I drove out toward the docks where Ward Marine operated. The place used to hum with energy when Grandpa ran it. Now it looked sterile, corporate, lifeless. I parked outside the gate and watched workers load crates stamped Navy Supply. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family was literally profiting off the military while pretending to honor it. I sat in the car, recording a voice memo to keep my thoughts straight habit from years of field reports. Evidence shows pattern of misused funds, likely collusion between Isabel Ward and Richard Ward. Motive, greed and control. Objective, uncover full trail of assets. My phone buzzed again. It was Lucas. He'd sent the vendor list. Ward Marine had secured 3 Navy maintenance contracts over the past decade. One stood out, awarded in 2012, right after Grandpa's second stroke. The contact listed for negotiation: Isabel Ward, VP Operations. The contract amount: $46 million. That explained why she'd forged the will. It wasn't just about inheritance, it was about locking down control before the Navy started sniffing around. I copied everything into a secure drive. Then I noticed a side building with a faded sign: Records Office. No security guard, no cameras outside. I waited until dusk before slipping around the back, pulling my jacket tighter as the wind picked up off the water. The door was locked, and a simple magnetic sensor was wired to the window. Old tech. I remembered from my training how to disrupt the signal with my phone's magnet. A quick slide, a soft click, and I was inside. The place smelled of oil and dust. Rows of filing cabinets lined the walls. I turned on my phone flashlight and scanned labels: payroll, invoices, legal. The files were a mess, labeled with codes, not names. But Grandpa taught me his system once. CI wasn't just random letters, it stood for critical invoices. I pulled out the folder labeled CI, 2010 to 2013. I opened it. Dozens of receipts, all billed to the same entity: SW Consulting. Each invoice signed by my father. Payment authorization signatures matched perfectly, too perfectly. The same digital stamp used over and over. I took photos of everything, hands steady now, adrenaline fading into focus. Then, halfway through the stack, I found one labeled December 2012 Bath Naval Contract. That one was different. It had a note scribbled at the bottom in my grandfather's handwriting: Review irregularities before submission. Numbers don't add up. It was dated 2 weeks before his accidental fall. My throat tightened. Grandpa hadn't just been suspicious, he'd known. A sound behind me made me freeze. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. "Who's in here?" a man's voice called. I killed my flashlight and ducked behind a file cabinet. The beam of another flashlight swept the room. It lingered on the open window, then the empty folder drawer. "Damn kids," the voice muttered before footsteps retreated toward the front. I waited until the silence stretched, then slipped back out through the window, heart pounding but steady. Back in my car, I texted Cole again. "I have physical copies, consulting invoices signed by my father, possibly tied to Navy contracts." Grandpa questioned them before his death. He responded almost instantly: "Secure everything. I'll cross-verify signatures and date stamps. Don't keep originals at home." I smiled grimly. "You think I'm new?" I drove to a nearby self-storage facility and rented a small unit under a fake name, Old Military Protocol. Inside, I stashed the photos, letter copies, and the invoices. Evidence chain secured. By the time I got back to the motel, it was past midnight. I made coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard and stared at the wall, running through possibilities. My parents would circle the wagons, Isabel would weaponize her social network, and local authorities would probably side with them. Small towns protect their successful families. That meant I needed bigger leverage, something federal, something military. I called Lucas again. "You still up?" He chuckled. "You forget I work nights now. What's up?" I found invoices tied to a Navy contract, fake consulting. Grandpa flagged them before he died. "Jesus," he muttered. "You think it's connected to his accident?" "I don't think anything," I said. "I'm collecting facts." "All right, I'll talk to Bryce Keller over at Defense Contract Audit Agency. If those payments touch federal money, it's fraud on a military scale." Fraud on a military scale. My family had outdone themselves. After the call, I pulled up my sister's social media. She was at a charity gala that night, smiling next to her husband, champagne glass in hand. The caption read, "Proud to support our veterans and honor Grandpa's legacy." My stomach twisted. She'd used his name, his honor, to fund her empire of lies. I opened the next browser tab and typed Navy contract fraud penalties. Maximum sentence, 20 years. Minimum, 5. I wasn't after prison time. Not yet. I was after truth. But sometimes truth and justice overlap nicely. I leaned back in the chair, the old motel light flickering above me. Somewhere between the buzz of the bulb and the hum of the mini fridge, I felt it, the calm before a fight. The kind you don't start to win, but to finish right. I closed my laptop, grabbed my keys, and stepped outside. The night air cut cold against my skin, sharp and real. Somewhere out there, Isabel and Dad were sleeping soundly, thinking they'd buried the evidence forever. They were wrong. The morning I woke up to see my own face on the local news, I almost laughed. The headline read, "Disgraced Veteran Harasses Family Over Inheritance Dispute." The anchor woman's tone was soft, sympathetic, like she was talking about a stray dog that had bitten someone out of confusion. My picture was the one from my Army promotion, the one where I looked proud, upright, and disciplined. They'd used it to make me look unstable. I didn't have to guess who was behind it. Isabel always played the media like a violin. Her husband owned half the advertisers in town, and my father still played golf with the paper's editor. They'd coordinated this smear faster than most units' coordinate supply runs. The reporter quoted a family source who said I'd been emotionally unstable since leaving the military, and that I'd been obsessively accusing relatives of crimes that never occurred. PTSD, manipulation, greed. They threw the whole thesaurus at me. By noon, my inbox was full of emails. Some from people I knew, old Army friends, asking if I was okay. Some from strangers telling me to get therapy. And one from my mother, short and cutting. "You've gone too far. Stop this madness before you embarrass yourself further." I deleted them all. I'd been through worse. But the story wasn't just local. Within a day, it hit regional news. Isabel must have fed them a narrative. The jealous veteran sister, bitter about her sister's success. They even used photos of Isabel hugging my father at the funeral, painting her as the poor daughter under attack by her unhinged sibling. I poured myself a cup of bitter coffee and turned the TV off. The noise didn't matter. What mattered was evidence. Emotion was their weapon. Truth was mine. That afternoon, I met with Harold Green, the old Navy buddy who'd handed me Grandpa's letter. We met at a small veterans' diner by the harbor, the kind that still smelled like bacon grease and black coffee from the 60 seconds. He looked uneasy, his hands wrapped around his mug like he was holding on for balance. "They're already talking about you," he said quietly. "Your sister's got people believing you're dangerous." I smirked. If I were, she'd already know it. He gave a dry chuckle, then leaned closer. "You sure you want to keep pushing this? Folks with money and friends in the right places, they don't play fair." "Neither do I said. He nodded, eyes serious now. "Your grandfather trusted you for a reason. Don't let them turn you into the villain." "I won't." Before I left, he hesitated. "Your grandfather mentioned something odd before he died," he said. "He talked about his old service locker at the Bath Naval Bank. Said he left a final report there, code 48G. He told me to tell you that if things ever got loud. I think things are loud enough now, don't you?" I closed my hand around his. "It matters now." When I got back to the motel, I opened my laptop. The files were old, encrypted, but I'd spent years in logistics intelligence. I cracked it in under an hour. Inside was a folder labeled Ward Marine 2012. Dozens of PDFs, memos, contracts, and one particular chain of emails between Grandpa and a Navy liaison named Lieutenant Commander Bryce Keller. My pulse jumped at the name. Lucas had mentioned Keller before. The emails were explicit. Grandpa had discovered irregularities in the Ward Marine bid and wanted to report it. Bryce had agreed to review the numbers. The last message in the chain was dated 2 days before Grandpa's accident. From Lieutenant Commander Bryce Keller to Colonel Walter Graves. Received documents. Reviewing discrepancies. Please do not confront anyone until we speak Monday. I'll handle the internal report. The timestamp? Friday. Grandpa died Sunday. I sat there, staring at the screen. He hadn't fallen. Someone had made sure he wouldn't make it to Monday. Before I could think too far ahead, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop digging. You're ruining your family's name." No signature. I deleted it, but a chill ran through me anyway. By evening, another hit piece appeared online. Army veteran under investigation for theft and harassment. It quoted anonymous sources who claimed I'd stolen company documents and broken into Ward Marine's office. That one hit close to home. Only someone from inside the company could have known I'd been there. I checked my motel parking lot from the window. No cars that looked out of place. But I knew better than to assume I wasn't being watched. I called Cole, my lawyer contact, and filled him in. "They're trying to discredit me before I can go public," I said. He didn't sound surprised. Classic move. Control the narrative before the facts catch up. "You still have the drive?" "Safe," I said. "But the leaks are coming from someone inside Ward Marine." "Your sister's not acting alone," he said. "Your father's signature's on those contracts. He's protecting more than her reputation." "Federal contracts, forged will, media cover-up," I said. "They built an empire on fraud." He exhaled through the phone. "Then we'll bring the empire down, but we do it clean. No leaks, no emotional plays. Just proof." "Proof I've got," I said. After the call, I reached out to Lucas again. "I found Bryce Keller's old emails with my grandfather. He mentioned an internal report." Lucas texted back minutes later. "Bryce still works for DCAA. I'll get him to call you." An hour later, my phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm, low, professional. "Captain Graves, I heard you've been digging into something that sounds familiar." "Lekin, Commander Keller, right?" He paused. "Just Bryce now. Retired. But yes." I told him everything. Grandpa's letter, the fake will, the forged contracts, the consulting fund, all of it. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said quietly, "Your grandfather was right." The numbers didn't add up. I filed an internal alert after his death, but it disappeared from the system within a week. I always suspected someone higher up squashed it. My grip tightened on the phone. "You think my family had help?" He hesitated. "If Ward Marine was funneling money through Navy contracts, it wouldn't have been possible without someone signing off. Maybe local, maybe federal." I felt the same mix of rage and clarity that used to hit me in combat zones, the kind that told you'd found the real enemy. "Can you get me those records?" I asked. "I'll see what I can dig up," he said. "But be careful. The kind of people who bury reports also bury witnesses." And a christen. When the call ended, I sat there staring at the motel ceiling. Somewhere between the cheap plaster and the hum of the air conditioner, I realized how deep this went. It wasn't just family betrayal anymore. It was systemic corruption. My sister had inherited the family talent for manipulation and weaponized it. The next day, I stopped at a local cafe for breakfast. When I walked in, conversations went quiet. The waitress gave me that nervous smile small towns reserve for people they've seen on TV for the wrong reasons. She slid a newspaper across the counter without a word. Front page, "Veterans' Family Fears for Safety." There was a photo of Isabel on the porch, fake tears in her eyes, talking to a reporter. The quote below read, "I just want my sister to get the help she needs. We love her, but she's not well." I folded the paper in half, dropped a $5 bill on the counter, and left. Outside, the wind off the bay was sharp and cold. I walked to my car, unlocked it, and sat behind the wheel for a long minute. My reputation, my name, my entire identity, they'd turned all of it into a weapon against me. But they'd made one fatal mistake. They'd reminded me exactly who I was. Not the family maid, not the broken soldier, not the woman who walked away. I was the one who always finished what she started. I'd learned in the army that when you're surrounded, you don't fight harder, you fight smarter. Let your enemies underestimate you. Let them think they've won. And then you move in silence until you own the field. That's exactly what I was doing now. The smear stories had done their job. Half the town looked at me like I was a walking cautionary tale. The other half didn't make eye contact at all. Perfect. They'd stop watching closely, and that gave me room to move. I packed up my motel room carefully, like a soldier breaking camp, and drove to Bath Naval Bank. It was the kind of place old money families used for private safekeeping. The kind of bank that didn't advertise, didn't ask questions, and never lost records. I walked in wearing civilian clothes, hair tied back, posture straight but unassuming. The clerk behind the desk glanced up. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said, sliding over a note. "Locker 48G authorization code, Cole Legal." Her expression didn't change, but she typed something on her screen, then nodded. "One moment." She returned with a metal key and led me through a hallway lined with vault doors. The air smelled like metal and old paper. Inside the vault, the clerk gestured to a small safety box built into the wall. "Take your time," she said and left. I unlocked the compartment and pulled out a small black envelope with my grandfather's name printed on it. My hands felt steady, but my pulse was pounding. I opened it and found a USB drive, a stack of typed documents, and a folded note written in his handwriting. "If you're reading this, Harper, they think they've won. They haven't. This drive contains everything. The contracts, the invoices, the signatures. Do not trust anyone in the family. Find Bryce Keller. He'll know what to do." My throat tightened. He'd known how far they'd go. He'd seen it coming. I slipped everything back into the envelope, tucked it into my jacket, and left without looking back. Back in the car, I called Bryce Keller. He answered on the first ring. "You found something, didn't you?" "Locker 48G, I said. Grandpa left me a USB drive, said you'd know what to do." "I'll meet you halfway," he said. "There's a secure federal workspace 2 towns over. Quiet place, bring everything." Oh. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from him in a bland government building that smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. Bryce was built like an oak tree, solid, calm, eyes that had seen too much and judged none of it. He slid his laptop across the table. "Plug it in." The drive booted up instantly. Folders labeled contracts, invoices, correspondence, each one filled with PDF scans, signatures, and timestamps. We started opening files together, and with each one, the temperature in the room seemed to drop another degree. Ward Marine had been funneling Navy money into consulting accounts under fake vendors, one of which was SW Consulting, the same name I'd found earlier in the internal invoices. Each payment had approval signatures from my father and Isabel. Then came a string of documents labeled Internal Dispute 2012. A memo from my grandfather to the company board, marked Urgent. All. Significant discrepancies found in Navy contract number B47. Consultant payments unauthorized. Possible fraud. Recommend full audit and notification of DCAA. Below that, a reply from Isabel. "Dad, you're overreacting. Please rest and let us handle the business. It's taken care of." And then nothing. No follow-up. No response. 2 months later, he was dead. Bryce leaned back, rubbing his jaw. He tried to report it, he said quietly. And they shut him down. Looks like they shut him up too, I said. Bryce nodded. "This isn't just inheritance fraud, Harper. This is federal contracting fraud. That means bribery, false reporting, maybe even homicide if they silenced him." The word hit harder than I expected homicide. I'd thought it, but hearing it out loud made it real. He started copying the files to a secure drive. "I'll open a review through DCAA. Quietly at first. We can't alert anyone until the data's verified." "Understood." Before I left, Bryce handed me his card. "If you get any contact from your family, calls, threats, anything, record it. They're going to panic once they realize we've opened the vault." That night, I checked into a different motel under a fake name. Same habits that kept me alive overseas kept me safe here. Every sound mattered. Every light flicker drew attention. I backed up the files 3 different ways. Encrypted copies on drives hidden in separate locations. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Private number. I let it ring twice before answering. A familiar voice said, "You're playing a dangerous game, Harper." "Hello, Isabel," I said evenly. "You think you're clever?" she said. Her tone was calm, polished, the kind she used when she knew people were listening. "Digging through old papers, dragging our name through the mud?" "Your name," I said. "Not mine. You've always been jealous. Grandpa pitied you, that's why he wrote that nonsense. Do yourself a favor and stop. You're not equipped for this world." I let out a low laugh. "You really shouldn't say that to someone who's been trained to fight wars, Isabel." She paused, voice colder now. You're going to regret this. The line went dead. I sat there in the dark, letting the silence settle. Fear wasn't the right word for what I felt, it was focus. She just confirmed everything without realizing it. The next morning, Bryce called again. I've gone through half the data. It's legitimate. The Navy contracts were inflated by millions. Your sister and father siphoned the difference through fake vendors. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. How long before the audit becomes official? Soon, he said. But when it does, they'll know exactly who triggered it. Good, I said. It's time they finally look me in the eye. I hung up and stared out the motel window at the parking lot, where an old truck idled across the street. Its headlights flicked off, but the engine stayed running. Maybe nothing. Maybe something. Either way, I reached for my phone and took a photo. When I zoomed in, I could just make out the driver, a man in a suit, face half hidden, pretending to check his phone. They were watching me now. That meant the story was breaking through their walls. I texted Bryce the photo. Guess the game's started. He replied, "Stay sharp. They're desperate. Desperate people make mistakes." End quote. I closed the curtains and sat back, the weight of everything pressing against my ribs. Somewhere, my family was scrambling, their perfect image cracking under the pressure. Grandpa's words echoed in my head, honor doesn't die with the truth. Maybe that was why he'd chosen me. Not because I was the smartest or the most loyal, but because I was the one they'd underestimated. The truth was coming for them, and this time, it wasn't staying buried. The morning air felt heavier than usual, like the world was holding its breath. I sat in my car outside the federal building in Augusta, a folder of evidence on the seat next to me, thumb tapping the steering wheel in steady rhythm. Bryce had called at dawn. DCAA was moving forward with an internal investigation. Quiet, confidential, but official. The kind that made people in suits start deleting emails. Inside, Bryce introduced me to two investigators who looked like they hadn't slept in a week. One of them, a woman named Agent Myers, spread the documents out across the table. Captain Graves, this is substantial. If everything checks out, this could trigger a federal audit on Ward Marine's entire contract history. I nodded, keeping my voice even. You'll find more once you start digging. The paper trail's just sloppy enough to expose them. The other agent leaned forward. You sure you're ready for this to go public? When the audit begins, your family will know you're the whistleblower. They'll figure it out either way, I said. Might as well make it official. Bryce gave me a small nod, that quiet kind of respect soldiers reserve for people who've already decided they're going to war. By noon, the formal request for audit was in motion. Within hours, an internal memo was flagged to the Department of Defense, possible fraudulent conduct involving Ward Marine Industries. That phrase alone was enough to make lawyers twitch. As I left the building, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from my father. 1 from Mom, and 1 text from Isabel. You don't know what you've started. She was right. I didn't know. But I was about to find out. I drove to the docks later that evening. The Ward Marine Yard was still running, floodlights blazing over stacks of steel plating and cargo crates. From the outside, everything looked normal, men working. Forklifts beeping, the rhythmic clang of metal. But now, every sound felt like a lie. I parked behind the old records office, the one I'd broken into before. A security guard I didn't recognize was standing near the entrance, talking on his radio. Corporate must have tightened things up since my visit. I stayed in the car, watching, noting patterns. Same guard every 20 minutes, same truck arriving for pickup. Logistics didn't change, even when people did. My phone buzzed again. Bryce. We've confirmed a match. The fake consulting accounts were used to funnel Navy money through shell companies. Your sister's signatures are on multiple transfers. Your father's approval seals, too. Anything else? He hesitated. There's one more name on the ledger. Someone outside the family. That. Who? He exhaled. A contractor named Marcus Hale. Civilian liaison for Ward Marine. Used to work for the Navy's procurement office. I stared out at the docks. The guard was gone now, replaced by a man smoking near the shipping containers. The name sounded familiar. Hale was at Grandpa's funeral, I said slowly. He gave a speech about loyalty. Bryce's tone darkened. That's the same guy. He signed off on every one of your family's contracts since 2012. I gripped the phone tighter. So Isabel and Dad didn't just forge documents, they had a man on the inside. That's how fraud like this lasts over a decade, Bryce said. They weren't clever, they were connected. That night, I didn't go back to the motel. Instead, I drove to Harold's small house near the harbor. He was the one person who never lied to me, and I needed a clear head. When he opened the door, his face softened. "You look like hell," he said. "Feel like it too," I admitted, stepping inside. The smell of pipe tobacco and old leather filled the room. Harold poured me a drink without asking. "They're closing in, aren't they?" "DCAA's on it," I said. "But it's bigger than we thought. There's a contractor tied to the Navy feeding my family money. It's been going on for years." He nodded slowly. I knew Gerald was right to worry. He called me the week before he died. Said something about a Marcus's pushing new deals through. Told me if anything happened, to make sure his records didn't vanish. My chest tightened. "He said that?" "Word for word," Harold said. He sounded scared. Gerald wasn't a man who scared easy. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Harold added, "If Hale's still around, he's the link between your family's fraud and a federal crime, but you can't confront him alone." I smirked faintly. "You say that like I ever listen." Before Harold could answer, his phone rang. He checked the screen and frowned. Unknown number. He answered anyway, but before he could say a word, his face went pale. "Who is this?" he demanded. I watched as his knuckles whitened around the phone. Then he slammed it down, breathing hard. "What happened?" I asked. He met my eyes. "A voice told me to stop helping you. Said accidents happen." My jaw clenched. "They're watching us." "I can take care of myself," he said, but his voice betrayed the lie. I stood, pulling out my phone. "Not taking chances. Bryce needs to know." I sent him a short message. "They're threatening witnesses. Move fast." Bryce responded in less than a minute. "Already ahead of you. DCAA forwarding case to DOJ oversight. If anyone contacts you again, record it." Harold poured another drink, hands shaking slightly. "You think they'll really go after their own?" "They already did once," I said. "Grandpa tried to expose them. Look what it got him." The next morning, I woke up to the sound of knocking. For a second, my heart jumped. But it was just Bryce. He stood at the door in civilian clothes, holding a file. "Thought you might want this in person," he said. Inside the folder were the results of the Federal Trace Bank records linking SW Consulting and Hale Strategic Partners to a single offshore account in the Caymans. The balance was obscene millions. "Your sister's been laundering government money overseas," Bryce said. "This isn't just fraud anymore. This is criminal conspiracy." "Nye." I scanned the pages, my hands steady. "And Hale's the bridge." Bryce nodded. "DOJ's prepping indictments. But until they're filed, your family's going to fight like cornered animals. Be careful who you talk to." He left shortly after, and I stood there, looking out the window. The world outside was calm: the sea, the quiet docks, the flag waving lazily in the wind. But underneath, everything was shifting. Later that day, my phone rang again, Isabel's number. "Against my better judgment," I answered. Her voice was composed, icy. "You think you're some kind of hero? You're going to ruin everything Grandpa built." I laughed softly. "No, Isabel, I'm saving what's left of it." She didn't respond right away. Then she said, "You're about to make enemies you can't handle." "Funny," I said. "People used to say that about me in Iraq. I'm still here." She hung up without another word. I slipped my phone into my pocket and stepped outside. The air smelled of salt and fuel, the sky washed in gray. A truck passed by slow, tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe not. Either way, it didn't change my next move. I was done being hunted. It was time to take control of the battlefield. Rain hit the windshield like small explosions as I sped down the coastal highway, the wipers barely keeping up. Harold hadn't answered my calls since last night, and something in my gut told me it wasn't because he was asleep. He wasn't the kind of man to ignore a phone, especially not after being threatened. When I pulled up to his house, the red and blue lights confirmed everything before I even stepped out of the car. 2 cruisers, a tow truck, and a small crowd of neighbors standing under umbrellas. My chest tightened. A state trooper stopped me at the tape. "Ma'am, You can't come through. I'm family, I said automatically. It wasn't true, but it felt right. He hesitated. Are you Harper Graves? Yes. He nodded grimly. You might want to talk to the detective inside. Inside, rainwater pooled near the doorway. Harold's truck was wrecked at the bottom of the hill, a single-car crash, they said. Brakes failed on a dry night. Clean cut, no skid marks. I'd seen too many accidents in war zones to mistake sabotage for coincidence. The detective, a man in his 50s with tired eyes, shook my hand. We're still gathering evidence, he said. Looks like he lost control near the bend. I looked him straight in the eye. He was being threatened. He didn't flinch. We found his phone in the vehicle. There were no outgoing calls. Because he didn't have time to make one, I said. The detective sighed. Look, Miss Graves, I understand you're under a lot of stress, but sometimes a crash is just a crash. And 3. I stared past him, through the rain-smeared window. And sometimes it's a cleanup. He didn't answer, and I didn't push. There was no point. People like my family had money that erased suspicion. Back in the car, I sat motionless for a while, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Losing Harold hit harder than I expected. He'd been my last link to Grandpa, the last person who'd believed me without needing proof. But grief wasn't going to stop me. If anything, it lit the fuse. I drove straight to the motel, grabbed my laptop, and logged into the encrypted server Bryce had set up. A new message waited. Audit confirmed. DOJ preparing subpoenas. Expect movement within 48 hours. B.K. The kind of message that meant the walls were about to cave in. But it also meant I had a narrow window 2 days before my family realized their entire empire was under federal review. I wasn't just going to let the government handle it. They'd sanitize everything, reduce it to paperwork and quiet settlements. I wanted the truth to hit daylight. I spent the next few hours compiling a video statement. Something clean, factual, impossible to twist. Just me, sitting at the motel desk, the letter from Grandpa and copies of the contracts beside me. I didn't name names, but I laid out the evidence. The fraud, the forged will, the offshore accounts, and the threats. When I finished, I saved the file and uploaded encrypted copies to 3 separate cloud servers. Then, I mailed physical drives to 2 people I trusted, Lucas at the Army Legal Office and Bryce. If anything happened to me, that video would go live automatically within 48 hours. I wasn't being dramatic, just realistic. At sunset, I drove to the docks. The air smelled of diesel and salt. The shipyard workers were long gone, leaving behind the sound of waves hitting steel hulls. I walked along the pier where Grandpa used to take me fishing when I was little. For the first time since he died, I could almost hear his voice again. A soldier doesn't fight because she hates what's in front of her, Harper. She fights because she loves what's behind her. That hit harder than I expected. I took a deep breath, wiped the rain from my face, and pulled out my phone. Bryce answered on the first ring. Bad news, I said. Harold's dead. He was silent for a moment. Accident? Sure. If you believe in coincidences? I don't, he said. You're staying somewhere secure? For now. But if they're cleaning house, I won't be far behind. You won't be alone, he said. Doe's got eyes on the Ward estate. We're moving faster now. Good, I said, because I'm done hiding. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum from the refrigerator sounded like a threat. I checked my handgun twice, made sure the door was bolted, and kept my phone within reach. Somewhere between the rain and the static of my thoughts, I made a decision. If they wanted to silence me, they'd have to look me in the eye first. At dawn, I put on my uniform. Not the army one, the ceremonial jacket Grandpa gave me after my promotion. It still fit, though the years had roughened the seams. I stared at myself in the mirror, the patches dull but proud. I wasn't going to sneak around anymore. The Ward family had built their reputation on public image, so I'd bring the fight to their favorite battlefield, public attention. By 9 a.m., I was parked outside Ward Marine headquarters. The front windows gleamed with the company's logo, a proud anchor wrapped in a banner reading, "Integrity in every detail." I almost laughed. Inside, the receptionist froze when she saw me. Miss Ward, Miss Graves, do you have an appointment? No, I said, but you might want to call Isabel. Tell her it's urgent. She hesitated, then picked up the phone. 5 minutes later, Isabel appeared at the top of the stairs, flanked by 2 men in tailored suits. Her heels clicked against the tile like gunfire. "Well," she said, voice smooth as glass. "If it isn't our family embarrassment." I smiled. "You've been busy. Cleaning up after Harold's accident, I assume?" Her face didn't flicker. "Careful, Harper. You're talking nonsense in a place full of witnesses." "Good," I said. "Witnesses are exactly what I want." One of the suits stepped forward. "Ma'am, you'll need to leave." I ignored him and looked straight at my sister. "You stole millions from the Navy. You forged Grandpa's will. You laundered money offshore, and you killed the only man who tried to stop you." Gasps echoed across the lobby. Employees peeked out from cubicles, phones already recording. Isabel's mask slipped for just a second, eyes wide before she regained control. "Security," she said coldly. "Now." The guards approached, but I didn't resist. I wanted them to escort me out. It made better footage. The moment I stepped outside, half the staff was whispering, and a dozen videos were probably already hitting the internet. Back in the car, I called Bryce. "You're about to get company," I said. "They'll come for damage control." He didn't sound alarmed. "Let them. We've already served subpoenas. By the time they spin their story, we'll have theirs in writing." The rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung low, heavy and gray. I drove aimlessly for a while, the adrenaline fading into something sharper resolve. I stopped at a gas station to refuel, grabbed a bottle of water, and checked my messages. One from Lucas. "FBI looped in. You did the right thing. Stay put for now." For once, I smiled. Maybe I had done the right thing. Not for revenge, not even for justice, but because someone had to finish what Grandpa started. As I got back into the car, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, tired eyes, rain-streaked hair, but something else underneath. Strength. The kind that doesn't come from winning, but from refusing to back down when everything around you says quit. The morning news hit harder than any bullet I'd ever faced in combat. Every major outlet was running the same headline. Federal investigation targets Ward Marine Industries in defense contract fraud probe. Beneath the headline was a picture of Isabel and my father, both walking out of a courthouse with cameras flashing in their faces. I watched from the motel, coffee in hand, the bitter taste matching the chaos on screen. The anchor's voice was calm and deliberate. Sources close to the investigation allege long-term misappropriation of Navy funds, falsified audits, and bribery involving a former procurement officer. The Department of Justice has confirmed multiple subpoenas. Then came the part that twisted the knife. Whistleblower identified as Captain Harper Graves, U.S. Army. They'd leaked my name. Bryce called seconds later. "You saw it." "Yeah," I said, eyes still glued to the TV. "Guess I'm famous now." He sighed. "The press leak came from inside Ward Marine's PR team. Damage control. They're trying to paint you as unstable, resentful. Your family's lawyers are feeding the media a story about mental strain from deployment." "Of course they are," I said. "When they can't discredit the evidence, they'll try to discredit the person holding it." "Don't engage publicly," he warned. "Doja's got your back now. Let the evidence speak." Now. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the TV screen. I looked tired, older somehow, but not broken. Not even close. My phone buzzed again, this time an unknown number. I answered. "You happy now?" My mother's voice, trembling with rage. I didn't say anything. "Your father hasn't slept in days," she continued. "Your sister's being hounded by reporters. The company's collapsing. Our name, I interrupted sharply, is built on lies. You chose this the second you covered for them." She inhaled sharply, trying to regain composure. "You don't understand what it's like, what we had to protect." "Protect?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean the money? The image? Because you sure as hell didn't protect Grandpa." Her silence said more than any defense could. I ended the call before she could spin another excuse. Minutes later, the motel manager knocked. He looked nervous. "Ma'am, you've got people outside asking for you." "Reporters, I think." I peeked through the blinds, 2 vans, 3 cameras, and a man in a cheap suit holding a microphone. I grabbed my bag, slipped out the back exit, and drove away before they could catch a glimpse. Everywhere I went, the story followed. On the radio, On social media, even in the cafe where I stopped for a sandwich, people whispered. Some looked at me with admiration, others with suspicion. That evening, Bryce arranged a meeting with DOJ agents downtown. I arrived early, hair pulled back, military ID in hand. The conference room was full lawyers, investigators, and a few men in uniform whose ranks outstripped mine by miles. The lead prosecutor, Janelle Pierce, shook my hand firmly. "Captain Graves, thank you for coming. We've reviewed the material you provided. It's solid. You've helped us uncover one of the largest defense fraud cases in recent years." I nodded, keeping my tone professional. I didn't do it for headlines. I did it because my grandfather tried to do the same thing, and he died for it. Her expression softened. "We know. His original audit request was buried under falsified reports. You brought it back to life." Another agent handed me a folder. "We've issued arrest warrants for Isabel Ward, Richard Ward, and Marcus Hale. We expect them to surrender within 24 hours. "Expect," I repeated. "You think they'll just walk in?" "Not all of them," Janelle admitted. "Your sister's already retained a criminal defense team." Hale's vanished. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the table. "Then he's running scared." "He's also dangerous," she said. "If he contacts you, don't engage. Let us handle it." After the meeting, I stepped out into the drizzle, the city lights reflecting off wet pavement. My phone buzzed again, another unknown number. Against better judgment, I answered. A low voice said, "You don't know what you've started, Captain." "And for Marcus Hale," I said evenly. "You think this ends with your family?" His tone was calm, almost conversational. "You've exposed a network that runs deeper than you realize. Walk away while you still can." "You're scared," I said. "Good. You should be." He chuckled. "Bravery's admirable, but it won't keep you alive. Your family's not your only enemy now." The line went dead. I saved the call recording and texted it to Bryce immediately. "He's out there. Sounds desperate." "9." He replied within minutes. "Understood. We're tracing it. Stay off-grid tonight." I drove to an old Army contacts cabin about an hour north, a quiet place surrounded by pine trees and silence. It wasn't much, but it was defensible. The kind of place you could see people coming from half a mile away. That night, sleep came in pieces light, restless, the way it used to during night patrols overseas. At some point, headlights flashed briefly through the trees, then disappeared. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it wasn't. At dawn, my phone pinged again. "Bryce. They've been arrested. All 3. I exhaled slowly, the first real breath I'd taken in weeks. "Where?" "Your father and Isabel turned themselves in through their lawyers. Hale was picked up at a private airfield trying to board a jet to Belize." I stared out at the mist-covered lake behind the cabin. "So it's over." Bryce paused before answering. "It's starting to be over." Then, hours later, the news channels were filled with footage of my sister and father in custody, walking side by side in matching gray suits that somehow made them look smaller. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and for once, they had nothing to say. But the real punch came from a different headline. "New evidence suggests Ward Patriarch's death may have been foul play." End quote. The story detailed Grandpa's last days, the memo he'd written, the calls he'd made, the witnesses who'd been ignored. Now, with the new evidence from the USB drive, investigators believed his death wasn't natural at all. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but instead, there was this strange calm. Like my body finally accepted what my mind had known all along. Later that afternoon, I met Bryce at the DOJ office again. He handed me a folder, photos, statements, autopsy records. They reopened the case. "Your grandfather's cause of death is officially under investigation." I flipped through the papers, my throat tight. "He didn't die alone for nothing." Bryce nodded. "You made sure of that." I closed the folder and looked him in the eye. "Now let's finish it." When the town announced a memorial service to honor the late Walter Graves and the Ward family legacy, I knew exactly what Isabel's lawyers were trying to do. Optics. The perfect distraction. While federal charges tore through their public image, they wanted one last performance, a solemn, picture-perfect goodbye to a man they'd betrayed. I didn't plan to attend. But the morning of the service, I found myself driving toward St. Andrew's Church anyway, the kind of place where sunlight never quite touched the corners, where every stained glass window felt like it was watching you. The parking lot was full local politicians, business owners, old Navy officers. Everyone wanted to be seen, supporting the grieving family. The same people who'd turned their backs on Grandpa when rumors of confusion started spreading years ago. Inside, I slipped into a back pew. My uniform was pressed, my hair tied back tight, no name tag, no medals, just a soldier paying respect. Isabel was at the front, wearing black like it meant something. Her husband beside her, face stiff, with rehearsed sadness. My father sat near the pulpit, shoulders heavy, his eyes somewhere far away. The choir sang something soft and forgettable, and the pastor began talking about forgiveness, about the burden of truth, and the courage to heal. I almost laughed. Then Isabel stood up to speak. Her voice trembled just enough to sound believable. My grandfather was a man of great vision. He built our family on hard work and faith. And even now, through all this pain, I believe he would want unity, not division. She looked out over the audience, tears glistening like glass. Our family has faced terrible accusations, lies meant to destroy what he built, but we know the truth, and that truth will stand. Every word was calculated. Every pause was crafted for sympathy. Something in me snapped. Before I could second-guess it, I was already standing. Heads turned as I walked down the aisle, the sound of my boots echoing through the church. Isabel froze mid-sentence, her polished expression faltering. "Mind if I say a few words?" I said, loud enough for the microphone to pick it up. The pastor hesitated, eyes darting between us. "Miss," but Isabel forced a smile. "Of course. Family is always welcome." She didn't know what was coming. I stepped up to the pulpit, the same place where Grandpa's eulogy had been delivered 2 years earlier by the same people who'd covered up his death. I took a breath, steady and calm, then looked out at the crowd. "My name is Captain Harper Graves," I said. Walter Graves was my grandfather. A murmur rippled through the room. Some people recognized the name from the news. Others simply sensed something was about to break. "I wasn't supposed to be here," I continued. "Not because I wasn't invited, but because some people here hoped I'd stay quiet. They've spent years burying the truth under polite smiles and public speeches. But Grandpa deserves better than silence." I turned to face Isabel and my father. He was planning to expose corruption inside Ward Marine. He wrote reports. He contacted federal investigators. He found out about the fraud, the forged signatures, the money laundering, and he died 2 days before he could deliver that evidence. I was quote. A gasp spread across the pews. Cameras clicked from somewhere in the back. Isabel stood up. "That's a lie." "Is it?" I asked, holding up a folder. "Because the Department of Justice just confirmed everything. Your contracts, your offshore accounts, your partner's arrest. It's all real." She froze, lips parting but no words coming out. I looked back at the crowd. This family doesn't need unity. It needs accountability. The same kind of accountability my grandfather believed in. The kind that doesn't hide behind inheritance or power. My father finally spoke, voice hoarse. "Harper, enough. This isn't the place." "It's exactly the place," I said. "Because this is where you all stood 2 years ago and lied about how he died. You called it an accident. You called him confused. But you knew. You both knew." He didn't deny it. He just stared at the floor. The silence that followed was thicker than the air itself. I glanced down at the letter still folded in my hand, the one Grandpa had written me. His handwriting was shaky but clear. "Honor doesn't die with truth." I read it aloud. He wrote this before he died. "If they bury the truth, let the truth bury them instead." The room erupted, some in shock, some in disbelief. The pastor tried to regain control, but it was too late. Reporters had already rushed forward, phones recording, microphones lifted. I didn't stay to watch the chaos unfold. I left the letter on the pulpit, turned, and walked out. Outside, the wind hit hard, carrying the sound of shouting from inside the church. I walked across the grass toward the small memorial garden where Grandpa's ashes had been laid. The plaque read, "In honor of integrity, duty, and faith." I crouched down, brushing the raindrops off the metal. "You got your truth, old man," I whispered. "Took a while, but we made it." Behind me, footsteps crunched on the gravel. I turned to see Bryce standing there, raincoat draped over one arm. "You sure know how to make an exit," he said. Had to give the crowd a real story for once. He chuckled. Doj's phones are blowing up. The press coverage actually helps. Public transparency kills half their defense arguments. I smiled faintly. Guess I'm still doing your job for you. He handed me a small envelope. Preliminary results from the reopened autopsy. Toxicology confirmed presence of a sedative one not prescribed to your grandfather. I exhaled slowly. So he didn't fall. They made sure he couldn't get back up. Bryce nodded. You were right all along. I looked back at the church, where people were spilling out, some shouting, others crying. Justice doesn't bring him back, I said quietly, but it keeps them from doing it again. You going to press charges personally? He asked. I don't need to, I said. The truth already did. R10. We walked through the parking lot, the air thick with rain and tension. Reporters tried shouting questions, but I ignored them. Words didn't matter anymore. Evidence did. By the time I reached my car, the adrenaline had burned off, replaced with something steadier. Not relief, something better. Peace. As I pulled out onto the road, I caught one last glimpse of the church in the rearview mirror. Isabel, surrounded by flashing cameras, her father's arm on her shoulder, both of them trapped in the spotlight they'd once used to hide. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like running. I felt like standing still. Because for once, the truth wasn't chasing me. It was chasing them. The morning after the funeral felt unnaturally quiet. No reporters, no headlines, no calls. Just the hum of the fridge in the motel and the smell of cheap coffee. The silence felt strange, almost hollow, like the world had finally exhaled after months of holding its breath. I turned on the TV out of habit. Every channel was running the same footage from yesterday, my speech at the church. Isabel's stunned expression. My father's silence. The crawl at the bottom of the screen read, Ward Marine CEO and family face federal indictment following whistleblower revelations. I'm E6. The word whistleblower didn't sting anymore. It felt clean now earned. I sat there watching, not out of pride, but because I wanted to see how truth looked once it stopped hiding. The cameras had caught everything. The confrontation, the crowd's reaction, the letter. No editing, no manipulation. Just facts finally louder than lies. The door knocked once, then again. I opened it to find Bryce, holding a folder and a paper cup that smelled far better than motel coffee. Figured you'd run out, he said, handing me the cup. You know me too well, I said, taking a sip. So what's in the folder? Don't tell me you're here for small talk. He gave a half smile and sat down. The DOJ closed the first phase of the investigation. Your sister and father have both entered plea negotiations. Hale's cooperating, turning over evidence to reduce his sentence. I leaned back. Coward's way out, but at least it gets the job done. Bryce nodded. The feds will seize Ward Marine's assets, freeze accounts, and issue restitution orders. Most of it will go back to the Navy. Some will be redistributed to the Veterans Fund your grandfather originally proposed. You might actually see that foundation in his name become real. I stared at the folder. He'd like that. He always said the company was supposed to serve the people who served this country, not rob them. Bryce flipped to another page. There's more. The revised will, your grandfather's original one, has been authenticated. The estate reverts to you as sole beneficiary. I blinked. You're kidding. Nope. The forged version's officially invalidated. He paused, then added, By the way, that last threatening text message you got? We traced it to one of Hale's low-level associates trying to spook you. He's in custody now. It's truly over. I laughed, though it came out tired. Guess it's poetic justice. The daughter they called a disgrace ends up owning everything they built off fraud. Bryce smiled. You could sell it, rebuild it, or shut it down. Whatever you choose, it's yours now. I looked out the window at the strip of sunlight breaking through gray clouds. I'll keep the name, but not the business. I'll turn it into what Grandpa wanted, a foundation for Navy families, scholarships, veterans programs, real service, real honor. Bryce nodded, a quiet approval in his eyes. He'd be proud. For a moment, the weight of it all settled in. Months of fighting, of digging through lies, of being hunted and humiliated, it all condensed into that simple truth. It was over, and the right side had finally won. Then Bryce's phone buzzed. He frowned, read a message, and handed it to me. It was a news alert. Breaking. Isabel Ward released on bail, pending sentencing hearing. I sighed. Of course she's out. She'll spin it somehow. She always does. Maybe, Bryce said. But she can't spin federal court. Later that afternoon, I drove to the beach, where Grandpa used to take me fishing. The pier had changed over the years, new boards, new railings, but the ocean smelled the same. Salt and steel and home. I stood there for a long time, listening to the waves. My uniform jacket felt heavy, but in a good way, like armor that had done its job. For the first time in months, I wasn't angry. I wasn't scared. I just was. I thought about Grandpa, about Harold, about the night in the records office, the threats, the silence that followed every truth I uncovered. Every moment of fear had led here to the calm after a long, ugly war. My phone buzzed again. It was Bryce. I answered. Harper, you're not going to believe this, he said, his voice buzzing with energy. The story has reached the Pentagon. I just got off the phone with Lieutenant General Marshall's office. They're creating a new civilian oversight position on the Navy's Integrity Review Board, and your name is at the top of the list. Think of it as turning your nightmare into a new mission. I didn't know what to say for a second. You're serious? He chuckled. Completely. Someone with your background and your moral spine, we could use more of that. You'll get the official offer this week. When the call ended, I just stood there, the sound of the ocean filling the silence. I'd lost a family, but I'd found something better purpose. That night, I visited Grandpa's grave one last time. The grass was damp, the stones simple and clean. I laid a folded copy of his letter beside the flowers. They finally heard you, I said softly. The truth's out. The company's yours again, in name and spirit. You won, old man. A breeze came through, then strong, cool, and steady. Maybe it was coincidence, maybe not, but I took it as an answer. Back at the car, I checked my phone one last time. The world had already moved on to new scandals, new distractions. But somewhere between those endless headlines, one story lingered. Whistleblower captain exposes family's multi-million-dollar fraud, restores legacy of fallen patriarch. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about justice. It was about reclaiming the truth from people who thought they could own it. Before I started the engine, I looked out at the horizon gray sky, breaking into streaks of gold. For once, I didn't feel like a soldier without a mission. I felt like someone who'd finally finished one. As I drove away, I passed the Ward Marine sign still hanging over the entrance to the shipyard. Rusted, weather-beaten, half the letters faded. I pulled over, grabbed a wrench from the trunk, and climbed up the side ladder. With one firm twist, the metal W gave way, crashing into the dirt below. The sign now read simply, Graves Foundation. I climbed down, dusted my hands, and smiled. The name fit. It didn't matter who believed the lies anymore. The truth had already taken root, and it was louder than any family name, any inheritance, any headline. As I got back into the car and drove toward the setting sun, the reflection off the ocean flashed against the windshield, sharp and blinding. For the first time in years, I didn't look away. Because this time, it wasn't something I was running from. It was something I'd finally earned.